evening is to talk about this month. Do you have a plan? I started this a while back. Looking at our current time in terms of what we might be doing with our bee colonies. March is a little bit early this year, as you heard a very mild winter. And so what we have in terms of our March is a couple things to think about. We really have 3 parts of spring. So the first 2 parts can occur all within this month. That's our problem with spring management. Things go a little bit fast. Food stores. We've got to have a chance to look at food stores, if need be, perhaps some feeding. And we do have on record some swarms this month. Not a lot, but being an early year, we may in fact see some early ones. So let's look at those couple of issues that we're going to be working with colonies. Have you looked yet? Okay, great. Would you make a record, because we're going to be back next month and ask you about your success. We have expanded the pub survey in terms of overwintering success, some of your management aspects, and we are taking it sort of region-wide. We're taking the pub survey region-wide, so we'll have an expanded database this year. So exciting things happening. We're right in the middle of getting it all finalized. Hive hefting, good way to make that assessment, simply from the back. If you have a non-traditional type of hive, open the window, look and see what's going on, or perhaps a more traditional way of actually going in and looking. Restrictions? No, except if you want to do it on a nice day, sun. You want to do it low wind if at all possible, and you want to make it as quick as you might be able to do so. So often we're not looking in the lower box, we're just looking in the top box. A quick assessment, so we've gone into the middle of the box. We haven't worried about the edge frame in this case. We've gone in the middle box, and we're looking, the brood should be up above. So 1, 2, 3 frames max, 5 minutes max, even on those days, in the 60s, we don't want to have that colony open any longer than we have to. And then you're using your smoker or your atomizer to keep the bees where you want to have them. So assessing it is our first effort in terms of the colony. Pick up any dead outs, pick out any that are not doing well. You may not have some options to do much right away, but at least you have an indication of what you're going to have to do come April with those that are just not performing at this particular point. Feeding. There's any number of ways of feeding. Our 2 basic reasons for trying to feed are emergency reasons. The colony is just hurting. It's still a little early to be thinking of a light syrup, because there still is moisture stress in our colonies. We still will get some cool nights. We'll still get perhaps some weather where they just may not get out for a couple, 3 days, or very, very limited. So emergency, we're thinking of dry sugar as shown, or the fondant sugar, or also the sugar cake. And there's lots of recipes for any number of the ways to do it. Try to avoid additional moisture stress in the colony. Stimulant feeding, we might feed, for example, inside the colony. There are feeders that replace a frame. There are, in this case, a peanut butter jar or an old honey can here with a removable lid. Fill it up with a light syrup for stimulation and feed it right where the bees are. Don't make them go anywhere for it. That's why all the commercials now feed inside. They replace the outer frame with a specific feeder called the Boardman feeder, lots of homemade varieties, and they don't make the bees go anywhere. You can think of a top feeder, as we are doing here. The box the beekeeper is lifting is just an empty box, just to close it at the top so you can put your covers on. You might think of 2 or 3 feeders for stimulation. But remember, if you stimulate and you have success stimulating, then you're going to have some issues down the road because you stimulated a colony to grow bigger earlier. Okay? Think of what you are trying to accomplish. If you just want to stimulate them, think that they're going to get bigger, hopefully, if you're doing it to benefit the bees, and they're going to be stimulated. Outside feeders, any number of different ways. At the entrance, which many of the beginning outfits come with, is not where the bees are, although in the commercial hives you see here they are, but some sort of a feeder so that you can replace them from the outside. These simply have a cover that's modified. The hole is drilled in there. The cover for it is just replaced, left inside, left year round, and the bottle's then replaced. So any number of efficient ways to feed. Think also good feed. If you're going to feed them, you don't want those off things going into feed. Some people like to put a little bit of extra stimulant in with it, and so we're thinking of any number of commercial products that have an essential oil in them. If you buy the essential oil, remember oil and water do not mix. You can try to agitate it, try to break up the droplets, that will help, or put an emulsifier in. And that's the secret of what Honeybee Healthy is. 2 essential oils, a lot of sugar, and an emulsifier for the small price of 30 plus bucks for a gallon, or a quart, whichever it may be. Okay? Stimulant. Biology. Our colony started with something like this, although some colonies did not really end up without any honey or any brood, but they grew into a cluster, and with a 2-box colony, we hoped our fall colony, that cluster would start in the lower box, set up in the lower box, or into the lower part of the top box, and the top box was full of honey. Now they did not eat all of that honey this particular winter. They're eating it now much more rapidly than they have in previous months. They did not eat all of that. And if you did not take any honey, they were left heavy, lots of honey. You may have an issue that the bees now that are trying to expand have honey in the way. That cluster then moved upward during the winter period of time, keeping in contact with the honey that was above them. And now, if we look in our colonies, we're going to see brood. We're going to see then the bees clustered on hopefully around 4 frames. All of those in almonds have to be double that, 8 frames. And the average for one of the largest renters was 12 frames of bees. And so most everyone was getting a bonus check. So what we're going to look like in our colony is something that looks like that. Okay, that's going to be your 4 frames. They're not quite centered, which is okay, as long as we've got on the sides of them. In your quick check, you're going to want to take a look at this frame, and hopefully you can look down between these frames and see some honey. On the ends of these frames where the cluster is not, you're going to see some honey, and this outer frame should have some honey. Okay? You may want to move a frame over and move it towards the center, not necessary. But you're going to see brood in at least a couple of those frames, larger colonies, 3 frames, maybe even now she's going over to a 4th frame, and then enough bees to cover all of that. So that's success. You've gotten that colony through winter. So that's what you need to do that looking for. Hefting will work. In hefting, what you're looking at there is you're splitting these 2 boxes. You're looking from the back, you can do it from the front, looking from the back, and you're looking at the bottom of this box and the top of the box down below. Okay, that's what hefting is all about. Barely need to get your smoker going to do something that quickly, a relative minimal disturbance. Actually looking at frames, and you want to be looking at this frame and perhaps that frame. Unless it's really, really warm, no wind, you're not going to pull out the frames. And at this point, the bees have a reason for all of that, so don't disrupt it. Okay? If they need emergency feed and you have honey on colonies that haven't yet used it, and this colony is hurting for honey, then you can substitute a frame. But don't break up that brood and that cluster. So put it to the edge. So you put it on frame 3 or frame 8 as emergency feed. If you have honey, that's a better feed than any sugar feed. Okay? So that's a little bit of the skinny in terms of honey. What do we want? What do we hope to accomplish beginning this month and continuing next month in April? What hopefully we're going to be able to do is get a colony to expand and use the area that you have designated for brood. In this case, this is 2 standard boxes, which will build a very strong colony. Many of us will use 3 half-depth size boxes. Many of us use a standard with a half-depth size box. The objective is always the same. What you designate at the bees part of the hive, the brood chamber, what we're going to hope for as we get towards into May, as we get in towards the time when we can expect our blackberry bloom, that these bees are fully expanded and using most of that for brood. Now, our last part of spring will be adding a honey super, because the year that we have this year, this may be a year, depending on your location, where big maple, the big leaf maple may supply a nectar flow. May get a little bit from dandelion, may get some from the fruit bloom, which is on the verge of starting. So if you have that super on, you have the chance of capturing it. That also has a bit of risk in that if you then capture and remove it for sale, you've got to go on faith that there's going to be some more season, that they're still going to put enough surplus in there for you or for themselves. Okay. What we don't want, of course, are the swarms. There is no magic recipe, no magic formula, nothing that works to control swarming. We would like to think that we can. We like to think that we are in charge. The opposite is true. But what we're going to try to do is pretend that we're going to be able to control swarming in our colonies. As I indicated, that may start this month. We have some historically this month. Most of that will be April. Most of that will be May. But we will indeed start this month. So what are some of the things that we can do in terms of issues with swarming? Opening the brood area. As our bees are up in this top box now, they may be content to stay in the top box, never expand back downward to the box, even though you intend to give them 2 boxes. They're only using 1 box. They become very congested, very crowded in 1 box. There may be honey in the way. I mentioned that already. So they're going to have trouble expanding out here to frame 3, 2 and 3, 8 and 9. They're honey bound. They can't expand there because there's honey in all of those cells. So unintentionally they become congested. They become confined. And when that is one of the issues that relates to their interest then in dividing or doing the swarming. Adding the super, particularly if we do get a good fruit bloom, things are looking good, we do get that big leaf maple bloom if you're near enough of the trees, adding the super takes the pressure off. Instead of having to store that nectar in where they want to rear brood. As soon as a brood emerges, they'll put nectar in it, not allowing the queen to get back to relay an egg. Putting the super on there takes some of that pressure off of that. Now, just adding the super will often mean that this brood will want to expand upward. So to keep that as a super, just for honey production, I've added a queen excluder to the diagram here. Whether you use them or you do not use them, early supering can indeed not work from your intention of what you're trying to tell your bees, but they see it as more room to expand their brood area, and they will indeed. The bees prefer to move up, not to go back down into that other box that's down below.
Bottom box and move it up.
Can you take the bottom box and move it up on the top? Yes, you can take and actually open this up, take those frames of honey out, and open it up so that brood is on every other frame. But please don't do that too early. Okay? The stimulating from feed may well be enough to help correct some of these things, but don't open things up in the brood area too soon. The bees have it in that form for a very good reason. They know there can be some cold nights. We know we can get a couple of rainy days where they just don't get out at all. They have to live on what they have. You open that up, you then create more space that they have to try to keep up at temperature, more moisture, more warm moisture-laden air. It can actually rain water back down on your bees. So just don't do that too early. I would not normally think we would do that in March. We may be doing that in April, but certainly not this month in March, even talking about an early year. Then a number of us like to think of that we can do something about that. And there are more drastic measures that you can do. You might take on one year a colony that seems to want to rear queen cells and say, I am going to be in control of this colony. I am the owner, you are the workers, and I'm going to control the whole situation. So take that on as a challenge. You may not succeed. In most cases we don't, but it is an interesting challenge to take on at least. Okay? A couple of resources here for all that. One of the ways we do that is we increase the colony numbers. We take divides. Another way that we do that is we create a lot more brood area by taking frames out and putting them somewhere else in a new divide or on top of what's already there. So there are any number of ways that makes for interesting reading. When you read it, it sounds, oh, I can do that. And you can, but do the bees understand what you're trying to do? So it can be a challenge. A couple of resources in your library, and I brought a few for sale as well. Increase Essentials, this is from my publisher, and also the Swarm Essentials. Makes for interesting reading. All it's going to probably do is make you more frustrated because you can't control swarming. But it resolves for some interesting reading. Okay? Read up on them now, because when you get in the heat of things and you start seeing occupied queen cells, it's too late. Okay? So you got to try to avoid that. And then when it happens, things go very, very fast. So read up now. Think that you understand it, and then see if the bees understand that you understand what you thought you just read. Okay? Interesting challenges. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, Dewey, when do you think it'd be safe to do some equalizing if you've got a really weak colony?
Equalizing, if you got a really weak colony, when do you think it is safe? You can steal honey from the fellows that have the colonies that have too much and give it over. That's not ever a problem, as long as you don't steal too much, of course, from the heavier colonies. Stealing brood is a good way to kind of equalize things. And again, the way our spring has been developing, we may be facing the issue of developing queen cells this month of March. And so at that point, that brood is in a strong colony, it's got to go somewhere. You've got to create space in that strong colony so they don't swarm. So where do you put it? Well, the end of March is too soon really to really start a nuke. We're not buying our nukes and starting our packages at least until April. So that's a good place to put it, to bolster those weak colonies. The one thing you have to watch out is you don't want to do it on a nice day when it then drops down and it's rainy for 2 days after. You want to let the colony kind of figure out, well, they've got a lot more work to do, they've got a lot more brood to take care of. And in early spring, certainly, transfer capped brood, brood that's going to hatch soon. Not brood that needs to be fed, okay? So you're not giving the colony, the weaker colony, a lot more work that they just aren't able to handle and be able to do.
K-wing virus, what are your suggestions on how to fix K-wing virus?
It is not easy. K-wing virus is a symptom of either nosema or tracheal. More likely tracheal, but it could as well be nosema. Crawling bees, trembling bees, bees dead out front. How do you fix it? We don't. A good way to do partial remedies is feed them, give them better resources, and if they you have extra brood to give them brood from the colonies that are too strong. It's one of those things that we can only do partial solutions. But try either of those.
Thank you. Okay,
so that's a swarming issue. My mind draws a blank on this slide. Tonight is going to kill me. We have a marvelous opportunity for the group. We're talking with Bill and your executive committee. It looks like we will have the opportunity as any member here to enlist on hive tracks for free. Hive tracks is a marvelous way to keep your records. If you are a Gleanings and Bee Culture magazine aficionado, the January and the February, part 2 February, and the January issue had some issues on hive tracks. So look on the site, look in your mailbox. We think we're going to be able to offer an opportunity, and then from the data that goes into Hytrax, give you some very pertinent information back about what is occurring in this club. So I think it's a great opportunity. Look at Hytrax. You can go on right now for free, and then we'll let you know how you can go on for the club as well. I think it'll all be as part as one. We think this is a marvelous, marvelous opportunity. It'll do two things. It'll help you with your records, and it will help us, a small committee, to be able to feed back some information about what is, quote, average or the norm, what your neighbors are doing, okay? What your neighbors here in Portland are doing, neighbors in the club are doing. All anonymously, of course. We won't be able to see the information that you have in there, but I think it's going to be a marvelous, marvelous opportunity. And the very progressive officers and executive committee seem to think also that it's a good idea. So we're at the point of trying to figure out what we want to do with that. So that's keeping records. Okay. Varroa mite. Already tonight I've had a couple questions. Varroa mite, of course, what we hope is you have the right genetics so that you don't have issues with that. You are doing a couple of passive things. Perhaps you are thinking about doing some more active things such as comb replacement or drone comb trapping. We hope you're going to sample, that you'll use sampling options of either powdered sugar shake or washing the bees with alcohol or the sticky board. And as you may recall, before I left in the fall, I started a project with some of the members of the club where you were pairing colonies, doing your monitoring, using either of these techniques, and then going from there, doing some sort of treatment. Right, and then there are the soft chemicals that are available, the essential oils, the acids that are available. We hope that your colonies went into the fall with low mite numbers. And I hope that you sampled them so you knew where that, in fact, that was the situation. Right now, with an early season, they are at risk to be able to use any of the materials, even the soft chemicals. Now, the one exception to any of that is the Mite Away 2. This is the formic acid, the quick strips. That material is permitted in organic honey production. It is also be able to use it when honey is being produced and being stored in the supers. The problem with the essential oils is they will pick up the odor from the materials, we think. And it depends a little bit on circumstances. And the problem with the one effective hard miticide this time of year is we don't have that 6-week window to get the treatment on before we know most ordinary colonies will be storing honey. So we have very few options in terms of mites for this early in the season. And later in the season we can add some more information in terms of what some of the issues might be. That's a very quick look at it. And now for some of you in the crowd, a new idea. This is a Eugene, Oregon person who learned their beekeeping in Eugene, Oregon. She moved to Chicago. She carries around in this, she actually has bought this from a trailer company called Ames. She can move as much as 300 pounds on her trailer. Notice the smoker. She has, with a Kickstart program, started hives in 8 public locations in the city of Chicago. And she then services the colonies without a vehicle other than the one you see. So if you thought that was a limitation, you weren't able to do it, you know, Glenn and Tim are on their way to doing something like this. This is also in the February issue. It's in the downtown article, a regular contribution from Tony Berman, the president of the Maryland group. But if you're interested, the email for her program and how she got the money initially for it is all available. Okay, and that's not the right. It's bikesforbees.com. Okay, Bikes for Bees, and she's an Oregon native. Okay. And finally, it's only March. Don't worry yet, but this is what's ahead. A little bit of attention to stimulation, making sure that they are in good shape. Perhaps a little bit of mite control, probably not yet. And this is going to be our problem later in the year. What in the world are we going to do with all of that honey on all of those hives? Thank you. Appreciate it.